Welcome back to the wallet. Well, we have done a number of questions on deductions, right? However, there's a simple question in front of you. What exactly you are supposed to do when you get a deduction question? Well, think about it. What exactly we have done earlier. When we get a deduction question, we have to check whether the given conclusions follow the statements or not. So where do we start from? We start from conclusions. And how do we check the conclusions? We'll check the conclusions with the basic diagram we have. Right? So the starting point is what? Conclusions. Well, what are the major types of conclusions? We have 4 standard statements and 4 standard conclusions. Which are they? All, some, no, and some not. These 4 statements, the first 2, all and some, these are positive conclusions. And no and some not, these are negative conclusions. So the major 2 types of conclusions we have, either it is positive or negative. So we'll start from there. Positive conclusion. If the given conclusion is positive, what we do? Well, it doesn't matter it's positive or negative, we'll check it with the basic diagram. So the given conclusion is positive, we'll check it with the basic diagram. The conclusion could be valid or it could be invalid. There are 2 possibilities. If the conclusion is valid, positive conclusion, if it is valid for the basic diagram, then it follows. That's it, follows. Now, a positive conclusion which is invalid for the basic diagram, invalid. If it is invalid, naturally it doesn't follow. Doesn't follow. Now, we have a negative conclusion. What we do? Well, similar method. If we have a negative conclusion, again we'll check it with the basic diagram. There are 2 possibilities. What are the possibilities? Either it is invalid or it is valid for the basic diagram. If it is invalid for the basic diagram, then that negative conclusion doesn't follow. As simple as that. Next thing, a negative conclusion, if we check that with the basic diagram and if it is valid for the basic diagram, then what we are supposed to do? That is where the challenge comes in. If a negative conclusion which is valid for the basic diagram, then we have to negate it. Do you remember the negation? Well, if you don't remember, look back to the previous videos. Deduction number 4, 5 and 6. Video number 4, 5 and 6 in deductions. So, well, when we negate it, if it is a no conclusion, it's negated as some. And if it is a some not, it must be negated as all. So, well, a negative conclusion, if it is valid, then we have to negate it first. After negation, we have to draw a new diagram. Well, after drawing this new diagram, what's the next thing? We need to check whether this new diagram exists or not. How do we check it? Well, we'll check it with the given statements, right? So when we check it with the given statements, there are 2 possibilities. Either the new diagram exists or the new diagram doesn't exist. Right, so we'll take it this way. The new diagram exists. That is one possibility. Or the other possibility, the new diagram doesn't exist. Well, when we check this new diagram with respect to the given statements, if the new diagram exists, then our original conclusion doesn't follow. Well, the new diagram doesn't exist, then original conclusion, you say, follows. So original conclusion follows. So this is ultimately what happens in reduction type of questions. Well, if you get a conclusion, that conclusion must be either positive or negative. There is no other way. So if the conclusion is positive, then we check it with the basic diagram. And if the conclusion is valid, definitely it follows. If a positive conclusion, when you check it with the basic diagram, if it is invalid, it doesn't follow. And a negative conclusion, if it is invalid for the basic diagram, it doesn't follow. And if a negative conclusion, if it is valid, well, then we have to go for additional 2 steps. Which are the 2 steps? We have to negate that conclusion, then draw a new diagram using negated conclusion, and check whether this new diagram exists or not with the given statements. If the new diagram exists, then original conclusion doesn't follow. If the new diagram doesn't exist, then original conclusion follows. That's it. We have quickly reviewed how we check these conclusions with the statements or the basic diagrams and check out how these conclusions follow the statements or not. Now let's say we have a number of conclusions given. Conclusion number 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, conclusion number 1, conclusion number 2, conclusion number 3, conclusion number 4. What we are supposed to do, as we have mentioned earlier, we'll check these conclusions with the basic diagram. Where do we get the basic diagram? We'll draw a basic diagram based on the given statements. So let's assume that we have checked all these conclusions with the basic diagram and we got the final result. Conclusion number 1 follows. Conclusion number 2 doesn't follow. Conclusion number 3 follows. Conclusion number 4 doesn't follow. This is what the final result we got. And what is the final answer here? Only conclusion 1 and 3 follow. Is that the final answer? Well, that is what exactly we see here. Only conclusion 1 and 3 follow. However, do you remember what we have discussed in video number 6? That means deduction number 6. If you have 2 conclusions which do not follow, in this case conclusion number 2 and conclusion number 4 do not follow. If you have 2 conclusions do not follow, what do you have to look for? You need to look for an either or condition. What is this either or condition? Either or. Well, either or condition is applicable when 2 conclusions do not follow. That's the first condition. In this case, we have conclusion number 2 and conclusion number 4 do not follow. So how do we check this conclusion number 2 and 4? Is it either or pair or not? So this is what we are supposed to do, the conditions for either or. The first thing, the one of this conclusion must be some. The other conclusion must be no. So it must be either the sum, no, pair. And both conclusions do not follow. These 2 conclusions do not follow. Well, this one is the subject of this conclusion. This is the predicate. And for the second conclusion, no conclusion, this is the subject and this is the predicate. And conclusion number 2 doesn't follow. Conclusion number 4 doesn't follow. Either or conditions, what are they? Both conclusions do not follow. One conclusion must be some, the other must be no. And subject must be subject. Subject of the first conclusion must be same as the subject of the second conclusion, and predicate must be predicate. Or there is another possibility. Subject could be predicate. Subject of the some conclusion could be the predicate of no conclusion, and predicate could be subject. Well, this is what exactly the condition for either or pair. Both conclusions do not follow. One of the conclusion is some and the other one must be no. subject would be subject, predicate would be predicate, or subject is predicate and predicate is subject. Let's assume that in this case we have the second conclusion as some R's are T's. Some R's are T's. And this conclusion doesn't follow. How do we get this conclusion doesn't follow? Well, we have to check it with the basic diagram. I'm not going through that formalities right now, so we assume that we have already checked it, and the conclusion 2 doesn't follow. And conclusion 4, it's a no conclusion. No R's or T's. And again, this fourth conclusion doesn't follow. So we have two conclusions which do not follow. Conclusion number 2 and conclusion number 4. Is it an either or pair? How do we check it? Well, both conclusions do not follow. That is what the first condition. One is some, the other conclusion is no. Subject is subject. Predicate is predicate. So in this case, these two conclusions, conclusion number 2 and 4, satisfies all the conditions for either or pair. Both do not follow. One is some, the other one is no. Subject is subject, predicate is predicate. Alright? Now what would be the answer for the final answer for this question? Well, conclusion number 1 and 3 follow. At the same time, we know that either 2 or 4 follows as well. The final answer would be only 1 and 3 and either 2 or 4 follow. That would be the final answer for this question. Only 1 and 3, well, definitely we know that 1 and 3 follow. Along with that, either 2 or 4. Now, the question in front of us, do we have any more either or pair? We have the first either or pair, some and no. Do we have any more either or pair? Yes, we have one more. Which one is that? All and some not pair. Well, all and some not. All, some not. What are the conditions for all and some not? Both conclusions do not follow. Well, both do not follow. Then, subject, predicate. Subject, predicate. So both do not follow. Then subject must be subject, predicate must be predicate. That is what the condition. Always remember one thing, put a star mark on the second pair. Second pair, there is a peculiarity. Well, subject must be subject. All and some not case, subject must be subject and predicate must be predicate. If subject is predicate and predicate is subject for all and some not, then that is not the either or pair. Hope you got it. Do your best. Watch the previous videos if it is necessary. Thank you for watching. See you next time.